The Secrets of Star Trek is brought to you by the Star Quest Production Network and is made possible by our many generous patrons. If you'd like to support the podcast, please visit sqpn.com/give. You're listening to The Secrets of Star Trek, episode 153.
Captain to bridge.
Spock here.
Make it so. Surrender is not an option.
Attention crew of the Enterprise, this is James Kirk.
We are all explorers, driven to know what's over the horizon, what's beyond our own shores.
We would have helped you get home if you had asked. That's who Starfleet is.
Hi, I'm Dom Bettinelli, and you're listening to The Secrets of Star Trek, where we discuss the hidden layers and deeper meanings found in all the Star Trek TV series, movies, and more. And today we're discussing the original series episode, Court Martial. And joining me today on the panel are Father Cory Stika. Hi, Father Cory.
How's it going, Dom?
Very well, thanks. And Jimmy Aiken. Hi, Jimmy.
Howdy, Dom.
Folks, remember to like The Secrets of Star Trek on our Facebook page at facebook.com/StarQuestMedia and retweet it on Twitter, where we're at SQPN, and leave us comments in our social media. We love to hear from you. So, yeah, this is a first season episode, the 14th episode of the original series. And I have to be honest, it's not one I remembered off the top. I had to watch it to remember what was going on. This wasn't that memorable.
Really?
Yeah, I don't know why that is. I mean, I remember hearing Ben Finney's name before, but I didn't remember the plot of this one. I guess it's not one that's come up a lot.
I remembered it very well. I remember seeing it decades ago. I even remembered lines from it, like Spock's hammer analogy and stuff.
Right. Well, let me quickly recap what happens for those of you who maybe like me don't quite remember off the top of your head. So the Enterprise has just gone through an ion storm in space, which is a sort of space storm, space weather. And there was an accident. A crewman who had been in something called the ion pod was killed. And Kirk is filing paperwork on the death at Starbase 11, where the ship is undergoing repairs. But there's a discrepancy in the computer log that says that Kirk pressed the eject button for the ion pod before he gave the guy the warning to get out, as opposed to after. And so there's this discrepancy between what Kirk remembers and what the computer log says.
Well, actually, technically, it's not before warning the guy to get out. It's before sounding red alert.
Right.
That's the key point.
Okay, yes. I should say that, yeah. Because he did give him a warning, I'm going to hit red alert, and that's when you're going to need to get out. So that brings an investigation and then brings charges of dereliction of duty and, murder and, or manslaughter or whatever. So Kirk is the one that's on trial here. He's being court-martialed. There's also this woman he encounters who is an old flame of Kirk's, who turns out to be the prosecutor. And we'll get into why that's kind of weird that she's the prosecutor in a bit. And then he gets this old-time country lawyer named Samuel T. Coggly, who is his defense attorney.
Who doesn't have a southern accent.
No, but he kind of comes across as the old country lawyer, and I have to do a southern accent when I say country lawyer.
Okay.
I mean, I suppose he could be a country lawyer from, the UP of Michigan, but
he's just a Luddite. There's nothing country about him. He's just a Luddite.
Okay. And they have the trial. It seems definitively going to go against Kirk until Spock finds a problem with the computer that indicates that someone's tampered with it. We'll get into that as well as we talk, because there's something very specific I want to mention about that. And that becomes a point of his defense. They go up to the ship. They go through this exercise, which ends up indicating that there is still somebody hiding on board that shouldn't be there. And it turns out Ben Finney is not dead. He staged his own death in order to frame Kirk, whom he blames for his failed Starfleet career. And there's a confrontation between Kirk and Finney. He subdues him, and Kirk is cleared of all charges and is able to go on his way. There's details I want to fill in as we go, but that's the broad strokes of it. I do want to mention one little bit of trivia. This is the first time that the words Starfleet and Starfleet Command are used in Star Trek. So they've used to be like Earth Forces or United Earth Forces, and they've used other things like that.
United Earth Space Probe Agency, or USPA.
Right, we've heard that one. So, but this is really the birth of Starfleet in the sense of where we first get it in Star Trek. So that's
I think they had mentioned it before, but we also hear that USS stands for United Starship.
Right, instead of United Federation Planet Starship. Yeah. They also throughout the episode use the adjective version of Vulcan as Vulcanian. I don't remember that ever happening otherwise, or at least again after this. But maybe you guys have a different memory on that. But I thought that was very jarring to hear Vulcanian used. So we have Commodore Stone. He's the Starbase commander, and very interesting. Played ably by I don't remember. I didn't write down the actor's name, but I thought it was done fairly well. He's the one who finds this discrepancy between Kirk's deposition and the computer logs, and immediately jumps to the conclusion that Kirk is lying or covering up, instead of there being a possible error somewhere. And he gets angry. It seems out of place. And I think what we've got here is an early computer age story, the 1960s, where it highlights the fears of people have of computers being relied on too much and people suffering by too much reliance on technology. What do you think? Am I off based on that, or did I hit the nail on the head on that one?
By the way, he was played by Percy Rodriguez, who's an actor you've seen. If you watch shows of this time, he's all over the place. I mean, he's really Mission Impossible, and you name it.
That's where I saw him. Yeah.
He shows up quite a bit in the original Mission Impossible.
Right.
So this is a man versus machine story, but more fundamentally than that, it's a legal drama. And I don't know. So why don't we give our quick personal impression of how did you like it?
Okay.
Yeah.
I'll just throw it. I liked it. I enjoyed. There were bits that felt a little eluded over. Like a modern legal drama would have a lot more back and forth. And the resolution, there were aspects of the resolution I wasn't happy with. I didn't understand Ben Finney's motivation or how he pulled it off.
Well, yeah,
and the fact that Finney was, it turns out, crazy instead of just angry, I think kind of undercuts some of the impact of the episode and what he did. But overall, I thought it was enjoyable. I thought it was a decent Star Trek episode.
Father
Cory?
And again, to repeat myself, but I'm watching TOS for the first time. This is my first watch through, and it's interesting to go back and watch this, where this is very much a 1960s crime or legal drama, very much not to the standards we expect after Law and Order and things like that. But it was actually, for what it was, a fairly entertaining story. I mean, that's kind of the interesting part is, crime dramas can get tediously boring if they're not done well.
Yeah.
And I think they did a good job of keeping this one moving, where there was an interesting story to it. Yeah, you did have a couple of kind of clunker moments where it just kind of like, okay, we can move on with this. We get the point. But they did I think it was a fairly well done story all in all. One thing you hinted at, Dom, about kind of the issue of the prosecutor, the woman who was the prosecutor, and relationship and stuff like that. And that's kind of like, yeah, that wouldn't happen in real life, but that's still that gets that interpersonal drama as well as the crime and legal drama involved as well.
Yeah. Jimmy, what was your impression?
So I remember this episode from all the way back in my childhood when I saw it back in the 1970s. And I remember lots of things. I remember lots of things about it. I remember the Star Trek dress uniforms, because this is the first time we get to see those. I remember the trial scenes. I remember Samuel Coggly, Kirk's attorney. I remember Ariel Shaw, the prosecutor. I remember the confrontation with Ben Finney at the end of the episode. I remember the ridiculous microphone heartbeat masking.
Yeah. Yes.
I remember all that stuff, and I remember liking it as a kid. And even I've seen it a number of times, I think, as an adult, and I remember liking it. But watching it with analysis mode on, I don't like it. It is not, to my mind, it is not well done. It has interesting stuff in it, but overall, it's just poorly constructed, and it really suffers from the fact. Now, it is as we said, it's a man versus machine plot. It's playing with some of those fears, which still are justified about, machines relying overly much on machines rather than humans. It's just now, instead of them convicting you in court, the machines are, the worries we have now are like autonomous firing solutions that are going to kill all humans. But what it really wants to be is a courtroom legal drama. And it's just the most wooden, ridiculous courtroom legal drama. Now, I understand that sci-fi has some complicating factors when you're trying to do a legal drama in a sci-fi context, but it can be done, and it can be done really well. I mean, I've seen other TV shows with courtroom dramas in them that were interesting, more interesting than this by a good bit. But if you want a really good example of a sci-fi courtroom drama done right, read the book Fuzzy Nation by John Scalzi. And if you can, especially get the audiobook version of Fuzzy Nation that's narrated by Will Wheaton. Nice. It is an outstanding performance by Wheaton, and it is an outstanding courtroom drama by John Scalzi. And at the end, it has twists and turns and good legal reasoning, and at the end, when you get the resolution, you just want to cheer. It is really well done. And by comparison, this is cardboard. You have a ridiculous hyping of drama. Now, courtroom dramas frequently take liberties. Like, in reality, legal cases take years to process through the courts. And so I understand, for the sake of drama, they need to shorten the time scale and things like that. I'm not worried about that. But there is just so much implausibility in this. The official charges against Kirk. So the idea is, the problem is, he says that he went to Red Alert and then ejected the pod. And if he had not done that, the Enterprise would have been destroyed within 5 minutes. So he had to eject the pod to save the ship. But the key thing is that they're prosecuting him on is he hadn't gone to Red Alert yet. That's what the computer log shows, that they were still at Yellow Alert. Okay. And then they charge him for denying this with perjury, even though he isn't under oath yet, and culpable negligence, which is the main thing that they're trying to get him on. Okay, fine. Culpable negligence and perjury, even though you weren't under oath, are real charges. That makes sense. But the problem is, there needs to be a sanity check here, because Red Alert is a hypothetical dividing line, and they're treating it like it's an objective state that corresponds one-to-one with a grave emergency. But a grave emergency can exist, and you may not even have time to hit Red Alert first. There has to be leeway in the law in terms of assessing, was there an objective emergency that would have warranted the jettisoning of it? You can't just look at the bookkeeping issue of, had you actually declared the Red Alert first, as if that were the ultimate deciding criterion. So the whole premise of the lawsuit is stupid. And then you have ridiculous stuff where Kirk and Stone are totally overacting with overblown writing to hype up the drama about this, where no captain has ever stood trial before. And so I'm pretty sure that has happened before.
Right.
But, so we want to shuffle you off to a desk job, or we'll have to drum you out of the service for the sake of the fleet. And that's the plea deal they offer him. Yep. But he and Stone are just going at each other with overwritten dialogue and overblown acting. And it's like, Kirk is like, a trial? I demand it, blah, 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 blah. Yeah. And then they get into the court to just stick to the legal part of this. And it turns out Kirk has never even watched the video playback.
Right.
Yeah. Of what happened on the bridge.
Can you say discovery, legal discovery, where you're supposed to see
all
the evidence?
This should have been in the discovery process. They would have given them all this. They would have watched all this. They would have gone over it frame by frame and used, in the real world, they would then use computer analysis to try to find out if the video has been doctored in any way.
Photoshop.
So this is obviously, I mean, the solution is going to be this video is deep faked.
Right.
And I can cut them a little slack for not having all that at the time, but still, it's ridiculous. You have Kirk's attorney, Samuel T. Coggly, pointedly refusing to ask any questions on cross-examination of multiple witnesses, again, just to hype the drama. And then finally they so it's like your witness, no questions, and they do that repeatedly. Also, you have Spock giving ridiculous testimony about Kirk could not have pressed the jettison button before the red alert button on his armrest, because I know how gravity works, and if I drop a hammer in a planet with a positive gravity, as if there were planets with negative gravities, which would fly apart and wouldn't be planets, the hammer will fall. And Kirk is just as predictable as dropping a hammer. And I'm like, Spock apparently hasn't watched the computer playback either. Have you noticed how close the jettison button is to the red alert button? You could press either one by mistake. It's stupid to put the two buttons that close together. He could have been trying to press red alert when he ejected. And then when you have the admiral in charge of the court-martial call Coggly on why do you keep blowing off your chance to cross-examine the witnesses, it's like, well, frankly, I've been waiting till we could get all of this preliminary nonsense out of the way. So we're dissing the legal process. That's contempt of court. Thank you. So that we could get to the real meat of the matter. And I have in my notes, insert inspiring but irrelevant legal speech here, where Coggly then goes on for an extended period of time about historical precedents, including the Bible and the Code of Hammurabi and the Articles of Alpha 3 and all this stuff, with an impassioned plea to let's go up to the ship and do an actual test. And it is all irrelevant paint by numbers writing.
There's a bunch of that I want to talk about, but I on that last bit about all the founding legal documents that enumerates rights, including trial rights, and the Bible has stuff in it about trial rights.
I was just giving him that. I don't think Code of Hammurabi. I don't remember the Code of Hammurabi discussing rights, but it's been a while since I've read it.
I want to go back to the ultimate, the top question, which is, what is Kirk's supposed motive for killing Finney? Now, Shaw says, well, Finney hated you, therefore, when someone hates you that much, you start to hate them. So you want to kill them? Like, that doesn't. There is no understanding of this.
But they're not charging him with murder or manslaughter. They're charging him with culpable negligence. So the argument would be Kirk has been harboring resentment against Finney, and that led to a lapse of judgment where he panicked and pushed the eject button before the red alert button.
Yes, I don't see how those two things connect.
So it's not premeditated murder. It's a spur of the moment accidental decision that was negligent culpably.
But that's connected somehow to hating Finney. Like I didn't get that connection between like he was less observant. He was more prone to negligence because he disliked the guy who was in there, I guess.
Well, they had the whole thing of, well, you made sure Finney was in that pod, and no, he was, like that Kirk said,
next
I
on
want
the list.
Finney in there, and Kirk, he's next on the list, and of course they showed a video, and sure enough, it's who's next on the list,
Yeah.
Well, Finney's the next one on the list. Oh, okay, send him in,
Right. Well, then there was the other problem, which is, so how did Finney come up with this plan, this elaborate plan to fake the records of the infallible computer logs in the time of, because apparently you don't have a lot of lead time in knowing about these space storms coming up, and he just at the snap of a finger figured out how to pull this whole thing off.
Right. And this is another point I wanted to raise too. Finney's plan makes no sense. How would he possibly execute this?
Right. Yeah, and then what's the end game? Is he going to sneak off the ship? I'm now going to have to live a life of a lie and never talk to my daughter?
Which you think he would have done after they got to the starbase when Kirk is holding trial. He would not hang out in engineering so that the microphone, literally an off-the-shelf microphone, was used as a prop. could find out that, oh, your heartbeat is still there. By the way, I love how
Nope.
the computer could find the heartbeat, but you don't hear anything else in the ship.
Right.
Including the gurgling of people's intestines.
Yeah.
I mean,
Well-
our heart isn't the only thing in the body that makes noise, guys.
Exactly.
Well, and also like you have internal sensors. We have internal sensors. I mean, maybe they haven't had internal sensors to this point in Star Trek. We eventually will have them, but yeah, it did. Yeah, it's overly elaborate.
And we do have to give some leniency for the fact of this is very, for computers and sensors, thing like that, very primitive technology time.
Sure.
In the 60s.
Yeah.
That, because I mean, when you look at the computer systems on the Enterprise, they're basically just upscaled mainframes. The old IBM mainframes that we had at the time, they just upscaled them to ship size. Is really all they did, and that's how they thought about them.
Well, that's an interesting thing I wanted to bring up was about the computer technology. So, like, there's a lot of confidence expressed in the inerrancy of computers. They cannot make mistakes, which is an interesting reflection on the time. In the 60s,
Yeah.
computers were new, and they must have expected that over time they'd become perfect. Now, we who have lived with computers in our daily lives for decades, we know how often they fail and go wrong.
Defrag, file corruption, reboot, memory error, chips going bad, all kinds of stuff.
Yeah.
I've had half a dozen problems with my computer this morning before recording this, or yesterday when my son's phone failed, and all these other things. So we're used to it. Or the falsification of data. We are very aware of that. So I found that again. I'm giving them a pass on that just because of the difference in our 50 some odd years later. Our experiences are different.
Well, it is interesting to watch this. You mentioned the word deepfake, and that was something that had never been heard of in the 60s. But now, deepfake technology, the ability to make a video that makes you look and sound like you're doing something you've never done, has gotten to the point where it is faking out people. I mean, it would be this, like if you put that video in here in this trial, you could make it look like, yes, he really did push that button.
Right.
Even though he didn't.
And they handle that in a fairly decent way. Now, back in the 60s, they would have called that airbrushing because you would have used an airbrush to doctor a photograph. So they had the idea of, doing that. And they would, in fact, note this was one of the things that criminologists would do every year. Not criminologists, but criminologists would do every year was look at the photos that came out of the Kremlin's May Day parade over in the Soviet Union. And then over time, they would note, oh, this guy is suddenly not in that photograph anymore. He's been airbrushed out. He must have fallen out of favor. So they had the concept, but I actually kind of like the way, given that they don't have the terminology yet to talk about this the way we do, they handle it reasonably well. They eventually come to the conclusion that the computer has been altered in such a way as to affect this imagery. And they say who on board would have the ability to do that? And Spock says, myself, the captain, and the records officer. And the records officer, of course, is Finney. And I would think that there would be more people than that, but fine. But that's a nice way to, without getting into the technical details and coming up with a bunch of technobabble, to just address the concept. So I think they did that well.
Yeah.
But there are other aspects of the computer technology that they're way off on. The way that Spock realizes someone has been messing with the computer is Kirk uses the word chess in a phone call with him, and Spock is like, chess, I better go play chess for no reason, which he then does, and he's playing the computer, and he beats the computer 5 games in a row. And now this is kind of interesting, because at the time, this was an open question. Could you build a computer program that was sophisticated enough to beat a human chess master? That had not yet been done. That was one of the early proposals of, okay, we're going to have, that'll be like a key benchmark in the development of artificial intelligence, when we're able to write a machine program that will beat a human chess master. And it was some years before that actually happened. So I could see how that would be interesting to the audience. But the problem is, that's a completely separate system.
Yes.
It's going to have nothing to do with making a deep fake. If you make a deep fake on this computer, you're using completely different subsystems and subroutines and apps than you would be using to play a chess program.
Right.
And so the two should just have nothing to do with each other.
Yeah, if the tampering is so pervasive that it's messing up the chess program, I'd be a little worried about antimatter containment, life support.
You're going to need to do a nuke and pave on the entire ship's hard drive if that's the problem.
Right? Yes.
Well, and again, this is, like I said, it's taking the old IBM mainframes and scaling them up to ship size.
Sure.
And the idea of a multiprocessor, multitasking, multiple memory banks, multiple hard drives, all that stuff was so completely foreign back then that this idea that, yes, a chess program uses a completely different method of the computer running than, again, video storage does. So.
Right. Yeah, and that's the conception of how computers worked was still in its infancy at the time. And so, I mean, I'm willing to give a little slack, but I did think it was a little amusing.
And let's be honest, the writers of Star Trek probably weren't exactly computer professionals either, so they probably didn't have a really good idea of what computers were like. Anyways,
they didn't have good ideas about other things that were well known in the 60s. At one point, when they're doing the experiment to track Finney by his heartbeat, Kirk orders that the sound over the speakers be increased, he says that that they're able to increase the sound of the heartbeats by 1 to the 4th power. It's like 1 to the 4th power. Really? They didn't teach you in high school that 1 to the 4th power is 1?
Right. 1 times anything is still 1. Well, 1 times itself.
1 times 1 times 1 times 1 is still 1.
1 times itself, no matter how many times you do it, it's always going to be 1.
You know that they meant like 1 with 4 zeros after, 10,000 times, But yeah.
So I want to talk a little bit about some of the character moments in this episode. Let's talk about Ariel Shaw. So she's the lawyer, the prosecutor that we first see in the officers' club, in the bar where McCoy goes to put the moves on her. He's very smooth.
I know, yeah.
That was great.
I did like I think the best line there was, "All my old friends look like doctors. All his old friends look like you," which. It's a bit of a misogynistic, like doctors are all men, but yeah.
It's also not a great pickup line if you're reminding her of her former love while you're trying to pick her up.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah, that's a good. And then we have, there was an interesting moment, so when Kirk gets together with her later, he's trying to woo her, but she cuts through the baloney and tries to give him good legal advice. Advice which she should be disbarred for.
Yeah, and she should not be having communication with him outside of court if she's the prosecutor.
Right.
Well,
but,
not just as that, but also conflict of interest of this is a former love interest that apparently you're still friendly with.
I know.
And now you're going to prosecute him. You don't think there's a conflict of interest where maybe you should recuse yourself from this trial?
Well, she should. And I tried to even headcanon that, even though they don't properly explain this. I tried to headcanon that as okay, this is a star base. Maybe they have one JAG agent here who can serve as prosecutor. There's no one else who's qualified to prosecute this case. And so under an exigent circumstances situation, she could be pressed into service to do it. But that's all headcanon.
Yeah.
And they also say that some of the other officers had to be brought into the starbase. They could have brought in a JAG officer at the same time.
Yeah. Right. Or Coggly could have been made the prosecutor, So because there just happens to be the civilian lawyer there. Yeah.
Yeah, but there need to be 2 lawyers somehow.
Right.
But I agree, it's bad writing. In the real world, she should not have been on this case apart from bizarre circumstances prevailing. Mm-hmm. And it's just included to have the love interest for Kirk also be his prosecutor as part of amping up the drama.
Right.
So then we've got Coggly, who is a ridiculous obsessive crackpot, as he himself admits. He's a Luddite. He opposes the use of computers as for storing legal records. He's got all of these enormous books that he, without permission, moves into Kirk's apartment on the starbase, and they play absolutely no role in the plot.
Right.
It's like come on, if you're gonna go there and have a ridiculous Luddite with a book fetish, at least make it relevant to the plot.
Right.
Have him have some obscure volume that never got scanned into the database, and so he's got some useful, precedent that has been lost to the computer system or something. But no, it's just here so they can bash books and go, or bash computers and go, yay, books, better than computers, when they're not. And not for the purposes you're using them for.
Exactly.
And it has nothing to do. It's meant to be character. It's meant as characterization, but it's such a trope. I mean, we already have Dr. McCoy, guys. We don't need Samuel T. Coggly.
Right.
Well,
right.
Kind of funny is, all three of us, we're book guys. We like books. We all have lots of books.
Actually, I don't. I have lots of books. I don't want lots of books.
Yeah.
The only books I have are the ones I cannot get electronically because I vastly prefer electronic.
Right. Well, and that would be my point too is, Jimmy, you and I both use the Verbum software, which is an excellent theology and Bible software for searching all this stuff, that it's a lot quicker to do a show me this than it is let me go to my bookshelf and start searching through the books and.
Yep.
And if you're a lawyer looking for legal precedents, computerization is exactly what you want.
Right. As any lawyer today would tell you. Another character who I don't understand their purpose in this is Jamie Finney, which is Ben Finney's daughter, who happens to be living on this particular star base. She exists in the beginning, she comes in and she's mad at, she's named for Kirk because Finney and Kirk used to be friends. And she's angry at Kirk, which is understandable. And then later on,
actually, when she first comes in, Jamie's has this rant against Kirk where she's like, "You murderer!" And I think I don't know how old she's supposed to be, maybe 16 or something.
Right.
I think the actress is probably older than that, but I think the character is meant to be like 16 or something.
Yep,
and
that old, but
because she has this kind of space teeny bopper outfit. But that's a good performance. Her initial rant against Kirk is a good performance. She's very emotional without being completely over the top. And then we have, as you were about to allude, Dom, this character development with her, where she turns out to be, and a lot of it's conveyed without words, as she's listening to court testimony. But she also comes around and realizes that Kirk can't be blamed for what happened here.
I was wondering that. It's like, because as I was rewatching it, I was thinking, did her dad reach out to her and now she knows he's alive and therefore Kirk should not suffer the consequences? Or is it she just changed her mind?
Well, the line they give us, it's logical to wonder, could she have had contact with her dad? But they never say anything to indicate that. What they do say is she went back and read some letters that her dad had sent to her and her mother, and that opened her up to realizing how close friends they had been, and that Kirk would not have done this. And so she now wants to get Kirk off the charges that are against him, even if it means him taking a desk job.
Right.
So there's also some interesting Kirk development, the character. So we have this scene in the bar where he encounters other Starship captains who are immediately hostile to him because they're all friends with Finney.
Yeah, icy passive-aggressive cat fight.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it was immediately hostile and suspicious of Kirk.
And these were all classmates of his, so they all had the same class because this Finney had been a professor at the academy. Right. And, and then went to the same ship Kirk was on when he found the error, which was, something like how do they put it? Like a circuit was open. In other words, a switch was open to the reactor.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was very dangerous.
Ship would have blown up in 5 minutes if Kirk hadn't closed the switch, and then he filed a report to indicate this happened, and that sent Finney to the bottom of the promotion list.
Right.
Right. Yeah, it kind of highlights Kirk's meteoric rise through the ranks. That Kirk went straight up to the top to Starship Captain, and there are always guys like Finney who just don't go anywhere in their career. And there was that incident, and also that he spent too long at the academy instead of out on a ship and that sort of thing, and that sort of put a taint on his career and that sort of thing. But he ends up blaming Kirk, which is, I'm wondering, like, why is he on the Enterprise at all? If he's got this, if Kirk knows this guy doesn't like him.
Well, I assume he was just assigned there. And I mean, Father, you can speak to that kind of issue more than I could. I mean, in a given unit, do people get assigned in even if their commander may have a few personal issues with them? Obviously, it couldn't have been grave.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, it's I mean, yeah, I especially when you're talking that kind of level where you're talking, lieutenant commander, captain, it's much more important than, say, like the level I was at as, lowly senior airman. It's like the commander's like, who's that? Oh, yeah, he's one of my senior airmen. Who cares?
Right.
So, I mean, and you can see at that kind of level where, again, if an officer is offered, okay, you need to go to this base, this ship, and he goes and finds out whose new CO is going to be, and he might go, do we want to rethink this?
Right.
But ultimately, yes, it could happen that, yes, you are assigned to the USS Enterprise. You will be the second in command, third in command. And, oh, by the way, yes, we know that you and your new CO have had bad blood in the past. Deal.
Yeah. Right.
In so many words.
One of the things that we talk about is from the structural point of view of this episode. There was two really strange things that they did in this. So one of the things that Star Trek often does, especially in original series, is we link bits of the story together through Captain's Log. It's a conceit of the series where we get linking narrative information through a captain's star date, such and such has happened, and that brings us from Act 2 to Act 3. But in this episode, they threw in two other moments of Kirk voiceover, which are not Captain's Logs, which are kind of just like we've got a plot hole here, we've got to fill up with some information, and we're just going to have Shatner read it, And it felt, I mean, did that strike either of you as odd to me? One of them was Kirk saying Sam Coggly had gone ashore to bring Jamie Finney on board. We felt Jamie's presence would make Finney easier to handle in the event Finney really were alive. And then we have Kirk stalking Finney in the engineering.
Father?
I guess I just figured because he was on trial that his captaincy was suspended. I don't know. I think it was trying to fit that model of the captain's log, but making it clear that he was not doing, like, it was a personal log, and I don't know. I don't remember. Have they had personal logs at this point yet?
Yeah, it didn't bug me. Because we're used to Kirk voicing over information, whether they technically include the words captain's log supplemental or personal log at the beginning. It goes down naturally. I don't notice the absence of those words in this case.
Okay, I thought it was a bit odd, but maybe maybe it's just but the absence of that kind of struck me.
What strikes me more is when the logs are describing an urgent situation as it's emerging, and it's clearly not. These clearly are not after the fact reporting. It's like. Right. We're in the middle of an emergency and you're taking the time to do a log? Really?
Right. Well, hold on with that thought. Hold that thought. I need to write this down.
Yeah.
So the other thing is the resolution of this is, so they've discovered Finney on board, and the only people on board are the members of the court martial, the court on the bridge, and a couple of bridge officers. I think just Uhura and the helmsman. Not Sulu, some other guy.
Yeah, he was off. George Takei was off filming the Green Berets.
Oh,
that's why he vanishes for part of season 1.
Okay. So the Finneys, they have found Finney, and Kirk has to go find him. And I'm thinking, is this really the best idea? Kirk's on trial for killing Finney, and sending him alone with a phaser to hunt him down.
I know, conflict of interest.
Finish the job.
Yeah, exactly.
You have, number one, there's a security service both on the ship, and now they've evacuated the ship, but they could bring back some security guys, or just use the starbase's security or the bailiff. This court is going to have its own officers,
right?
And so it should not be Kirk. This is a massive, massive problem with this trial to let Kirk go track down this guy. And they try to put a fig leaf on it by Kirk saying, "This is my problem." yeah, in a way that disqualifies you from dealing with it.
Right. And then we have this confrontation and fist fight in engineering between Finney and Kirk, where I'm watching it in modern high definition and seeing the stunt doubles is really kind of fun.
Bad.
Yeah,
we get to see Kirk. We get to see Kirk repeatedly change back and forth into his stuntman, and during the obligatory fist fight for the climax of the episode. And then we have an intentional, unintentional wardrobe malfunction. And in the words of the immortal Alan Rickman,
so you managed to get your shirt off.
Yeah.
Yes. Kirk shirt has to get torn. I think it's contractual.
I wrote down the same exact line right as soon as I saw that. It's like, yep, exactly.
That's funny.
There's also another bit of hilarity in this sequence where, so to give us a ticking clock, Finney's plan has changed. Originally, he was just going to ruin Kirk's career, but now he's going to destroy Kirk's ship. He's going to destroy the Enterprise by causing its orbit to decay.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, how did he know they were? Well, anyway, I guess there are ways he could know once they start evacuating what's going on.
Right.
He's also apparently a computer genius, so he can be monitoring their communications. But his new plan is, I'm going to, or actually I have shorted out your technology stuff so that your orbit will begin rapidly decaying. And this must not have been a very well put together orbit, because satellites can stay in orbit for decades without their orbits decaying. But the Enterprise is having its orbit decay rapidly, and I'm going to kill everybody on board, including all of the officers of the court, because those officers and gentlemen all are the people who were holding me down. They're the man. And so they deserve to die too, as do all the other innocent crew members at my level for some reason. But as the orbit is decaying and Spock is on the bridge trying to bring back the power to restart the impulse engines and failing, he tells the officers of the court, gentlemen, please go to the transporter room, which is exactly the right call at this moment. And Admiral Stone interjects with, this court has not yet reached a verdict. And I'm going, dude,
Finney's not dead.
If there was a ticking, Finney is not dead, so your charges against Kirk just evaporated. You have to try him on entirely new charges if you want. You can declare a mistrial right here. And furthermore, if you were in a courtroom where the key legal issue had not been settled and was still open, and there was a ticking bomb in the building, you would evacuate in real life.
Right.
You can reconvene at a new location.
These are men made of sterner stuff than you or I, and they'll face down danger because they're starship
They'll go
captains.
down with the ship regardless.
It's more bad writing to hype the drama. Also, the person that Finney does not want to die is Jamie, his daughter. Yeah. And so Coggly has gone to get her and bring her on the ship, and we never see her.
Right.
We're just told in Kirk's voiceover she must be, or Kirk says to Finney, she must be on board by now. And it's like, that's not the way you negotiate with this guy. As soon as Jamie is in the transporter room, you get her on the phone and then get engineering on speakerphone and have appeals to Dad to stand down from massive crazy plan.
Right, Jamie being on, like, that whole bit of we brought Jamie aboard plays absolutely no role in the rest of this episode. Like, there's
It motivates Finney to give up and spill the beans about what he did to the ship so Kirk can fix it.
He still fights Kirk at that point.
He does, but eventually Kirk beats him up, and it's enough. It's one of the contributing factors so that Jamie won't have to die.
That and the beatdown.
But they just don't play it the right way. If that's what you want to do with Jamie, then don't tell.
Right.
So I mentioned earlier that they made Finney to be, he's crazy or mentally ill instead of just full of malice. I feel like it would have been a better story if he was just full of malice. He was just a bad guy instead of, I feel like it was kind of an easy out to make him, Kirk could be the bigger man. It can hold him and they're there, Ben, we'll get you some help. I don't know. I just felt like it would be. He's just a bad dude who needs to be put in jail or something. You know.
It would have been harder to sell the prior friendship with him and Kirk, as opposed to a guy who became mentally ill.
I suppose.
Yeah, that really is kind of how they played it, where it wasn't up until this point where he just went off his rocker, basically. You know, because again, they had been, you know, Jamie had said that, oh yeah, I'd read all his, like you said earlier, you know, letters, and they're such great friends, and all of a sudden now he wants Kirk to lose his command. Well, it's because he went nuts, went space crazy.
Yeah, well, his resentment began. Yeah,
happy. There you go.
Yeah, his resentment began after the Kirk filed a report on him and his career stalled. But I see what you're saying. That it could be.
I got the feeling though,
a sudden break.
Kirk was an ensign when he filed that report. This was early in Kirk's career, so I got the feeling it was, you know, Finney had forgiven him for that, realized that he was in the wrong and that it wasn't Kirk's. But then as he went crazy, it came back.
Yeah.
Okay, I suppose that makes sense. One other little detail I really liked was at the end when they're trying to recover the ship and get things restarted and save it. The only officers, like I mentioned, on board were the helmsman and Uhura. And Uhura jumps onto the navigation console.
Yeah.
She's not just an operator. She knows what she's doing.
They have cross-training on that bridge. That is great. That is good management practice. If you've got essential functions in this one control center, you want as many people as possible being able to swap stations. And I loved seeing Uhura take over as the navigator.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and she's cool under pressure. She was cool. That was really good. I like that. So let me think. Anything else that I got all my details. Anything else, Father Cory, that you wanted to mention?
So I had to laugh when there was the line about no starship captain has stood trial. Is that like no Starfleet officer has committed mutiny or was a traitor?
Yeah, Discovery.
All these things are going to get walked back. Yeah.
It's and then, you know, I love how they talk about, you know, finding the ion storm. So they take the idea of storm so literally. So they've got a weather scan and a meteorology department. It's like, okay, so they're literally looking for meteors, not just weather, but meteors.
Literally, yeah.
Yeah, I think that was it. But it was just, I got such a kick out of that. It's like, yeah, they're literally talking about weather.
Weather in space. Jimmy?
So at the end of the episode, Coggly vanishes from the show as soon as he goes off to get Jamie, and we never see him or Jamie again. But at the end, in the final scene, we have Ariel Shaw come back on the ship. She's on the bridge. She's flirting with Kirk. She even kisses him on the bridge, and they hang a lantern on it. Would it cause a total breakdown in discipline if a lawyer kissed her former lover on the bridge or whatever? And Kirk's like, let's find out. But she informs her other function in this scene, besides to get the flirting in, is to give us exposition about what's happening with Finney and Coggly and Jamie and so forth. And she says that Coggly is going to now be the defense attorney for Ben Finney and says he'll get him off. And Kirk bets that he probably will win. And I'm going, yes, he probably will win if all of the witnesses are now leaving from what just happened. But Coggly has an interesting point early on. If you scrape away all the irrelevant bloviating about legal precedent, his fundamental point is Kirk should have a right to face his accuser, which in this case is a computer. Now, in reality, this would have been done during Discovery.
Yes.
But, yeah, okay, there needs to be a testing of the computer systems that Kirk should be able to do. Now, they've already had Spock do a check to see, is there any evidence of tampering with the computer or other error with the computer? But Spock's doing that on behalf of Starfleet. Kirk should have every right as part of Discovery to have his experts run tests on the Enterprise's computer. And so even though they do it in a kind of ridiculous way, the going up to the ship to do the heartbeat test with the off-the-shelf 1960s omnidirectional microphone white sound device actually makes legal sense. So that's good. Another thing that's kind of a couple things that are limitations of 60s television. When Kirk first starts the episode and is giving us the opening captain's log, he says that we've been through an ion storm and these dramatic events have happened. And it's like, oh, it would have been nice to see that, rather than just hearing about it. And eventually they do give us the video playback of what's happening on the bridge during the ion storm, but we never see the storm itself.
Right.
And that would be nice to have seen, but it was 60s television and they had much more limited special effects budgets. Also, another limitation of 60s episodic television is, this close personal friend we've never seen before, despite the fact he's serving on the same ship, comes out of the woodwork and has a grudge against Kirk.
Mm-hmm.
And today, we would have that set up much better. We would have seen Finney a long time before now,
right?
Before this happened. But it was just the TV of the time.
Yeah.
And speaking of times, the most important thing we haven't discussed, all of those 23rd century space fashions. Because normally we just see the crew in their uniforms and that's it. If it's a bottle episode, we see nobody else. But here we get them in dress uniforms for the first time. We see lots of civilians on this starbase, including Jamie in this silver space skirt and kind of naval-looking
little
top.
Sailor Moon.
I don't know what you call that. It is kind of like Sailor Moon, I guess.
Yeah.
We get to see Ariel Shaw in her psychedelic paisley dress. We get to see the bartender in the same bartender uniform I think we see later on in Trouble with Tribbles.
Mm-hmm.
So we get to see the starbase, which is really different. Normally it's all spaceships, but we get to see the starbase here. And so visually, this episode is more interesting than what we normally get.
Right. That's true. In that sense, it really expands the Star Trek universe a bit. This episode, it gives us more of the world around the Enterprise than we had before. So I do like that.
Also,
nice.
like in the remastered version that I watched, they've got, when you see the starbase, they've got people walking around in the lighted rooms at the starbase at night that are clearly added in digitally.
I like the updated special effects for in the space too, like the seeing them working on repairing the Enterprise from the damage and that sort of stuff, which you didn't get in the original. I like these new special effects that they've remastered for the original series because they're updated, but they don't look like, I don't know, Star Trek Discovery, super modern. They still feel part of the time. They just look better. And I like that.
Agreed.
All right. I think that should do it for us. We want to take a moment to thank our patrons who make it possible for us to create the Secrets of Star Trek, including Leonidas S., Megan S., Neil P., Rhonda M., and Meg P. Their generous donations at sqpn.com/give make it possible for us to continue the Secrets of Star Trek and all the shows at StarQuest. You can join them by visiting sqpn.com/give. And we'd also like to thank Victor Lambs, who edits the show for us every week. So that's it from us. What did you think of Court Martial? You can let us know by commenting on the show at sqpn.com/trek or our Facebook page at facebook.com/StarQuestMedia or send an email to trek@sqpn.com. We'll be back next time when we'll be discussing the animated series episode, The Survivor. Until then, Father Cory Stika, thank you for joining me and sharing the Secrets of Star Trek.
Thanks, Tom.
Jimmy Aiken, thank you as well.
Thank you, and live long and prosper.
And once again, I'm Dom Bettinelli. Thank you for listening to the Secrets of Star Trek on StarQuest. And remember, she's a very good lawyer.
Obviously.
Indeed she is.